Ned Canty, General Director of Opera Memphis and Stage Director for our production of La Boheme, currently in rehearsals. It is day 3 of rehearsal. You can see that it's light out behind me as opposed to the last two. We're taking the evening to go and have a fantastic party, introduce our singers to some local Memphis families, enjoy some food, that sort of thing. So we ended a little bit early today, but it was our first day of staging. We worked primarily with the boys in the garret, Act 1. I'd like to work in order. You often find that in the first day there'll be some moment that seems relatively small, but the decision that you make will sort of branch and branch and branch and branch, and you'll end up in the end with possibly a very different interpretation of a character or a moment that happens later, depending on what you've done. So I do like to work in order whenever I can. Today, I think the most interesting thing that we really talked about was Rodlfo and where he is right now as an artist. The piece is often remarked on for the fact that none of the guys are very successful artists. Chenard maybe a little bit, but the guys are struggling. They're not making any money. Marcello isn't selling any paintings. Colline is not a lot of money in being a philosopher anyway. And Rodlfo is working on his play, but really is trying to make a living writing articles for a magazine, which is a journal for the hat-making trade. So not exactly what he had in mind when he decided that he wanted to be a poet. So as anyone who knows the opera knows, in the first act, they're very cold, they have no firewood, so Rodlfo decides to burn his play. And, we talked a lot about what that means to him and sort of where he is, and looked a little bit at the rhythm of how the two boys talk to each other in the beginning. And you could sort of see the writer's block that Rodlfo is having. And you can see the moment, we talked about, so you've been working on this play for years. It's your only copy. There's no Xerox machine. You don't have it saved on in the cloud somewhere. So when he decides to burn it, when he does this, it's actually a very big deal. And then the music and the words treated in a comic way. The question is it being treated in a comic way because he takes it lightly, or is it being treated in a comic way because he's trying to make it funny? And sometimes, of course, there maybe is a sense of relief that he's getting rid of this thing he's been working on that's sort of, as Spalding Gray put it, a monster in a box, an artistic work that just is sucking the soul out of him because he can't finish it. So we talked a little bit about that, and I think we're definitely getting somewhere in trying to find sort of where Rodlfo is as an artist, because certainly when he meets Mimi, he's able to find his poetry again. I mean, he really kind of gets his groove back when he meets her. He's able to use metaphors, introduce her. He talks in a very different way compared to how he talks earlier in the opera. So we talked about that, and I think there's another part of this, and it really was how we got there, talking a little bit about why Rodlfo initially stays behind when the other 3 Bohemians go off to Café Momus. He says he's going to stay, he needs to finish this article. And of course it's Christmas Eve, so it's not like he's going to be able to drop off the article first thing tomorrow morning on Christmas Day if he finishes it. So the question is, either it's just a contrivance. It's bad drama. It's bad writing that coincidentally he stays behind, for Mimi to come and meet him, or there's something else going on. And given the choice between bad drama and an interesting moment for the character, I'm always going to go for the latter. So we talked a little bit about that early on about what might this really be about? And, he sits down to write, and he can't even write about hat making. So, I do think the piece begins with Rodlfo in a little bit of a crisis. The opera deals with these guys realizing that, maybe they're not going to make it. I think struggling at a certain point with the choices they've made, the sacrifices they've made to try to be artists, and wondering how much longer they can proceed, without any kind of success, without any positive feedback. And, today it's no different than actors going to Hollywood or New York, and, some last a year, some 5 years, some 15 or 20 years, and you'll see people still sort of knocking on the same doors after 20 years. So they're all engaged in that. Sort of that question, I think, as this opera begins. So we talked quite a bit about that, and I think I probably talked more about the nature of the play and Rodolfo's relationship to it than most directors generally do, but it was interesting. I always say that one of the first questions that a director should ask themselves is, why is there an opera today? What is different about today that means today an opera is going to happen? And you could argue that the different thing about today is that Mimi shows up. She comes there. But I think it's more interesting to me, I think, and more interesting to the audience, more importantly, if we actually track that all the way back to, well, why is it that Rodolfo is there that night instead of going out with his friends, instead of celebrating the way that he normally would? What's going on in his life that causes him to do that, so that when Mimi comes by, he's there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's what really sets the whole thing into motion. So I think that's sort of it for day 1 of staging, day 3 of general rehearsals. Tomorrow we're going to be continuing with the boys in Act 1, and then at night we're getting into Act 2, the Café Mamousse scene, which is always the big challenge of the piece, is to get people moving around to create the life that you would have in a place like the Latin Quarter, to make it feel natural and elegant and musical and all of those things. So that's what we're going to be working on tomorrow, and I will talk to you after that. So thanks very much, and I hope you're enjoying our little video blogs about rehearsal.